had these, kind of shelves or not, whatever, counters in the front and then counters going down the side. They welcomed you here. You took your pictures down here. Out behind the counters, no privacy at all, is the desk. She said, there's the new director. No private office, no nothing. So I went out to meet this guy. And I said, what's your job as the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles? Write this down or put it on your forehead. It's a wonderful definition of a manager. He said, my job is to reorganize the department on a moment-to-moment basis, depending on citizen need. You know what he had done? He had cross-trained everybody in everybody's job, so everybody could take pictures, everybody could run the front desk, including secretaries and bookkeepers in the back of the house, who, if there was a run-on by citizens, he said, that's not mission critical, get out here, the citizens out here. Nobody could go to lunch between 11:30 and 2. Why? That's when the citizens are free, see? And so this guy is really amazing. Now, just to show you how amazing it is, shortly after this, my secretary turned 50, and she decided that she was going to get one of those mopeds or one of those scooter deals, and she's going to bop around Southern California, see? So she gets this beauty, and she never even thought about a license. She thought car license, moped, No, you got to get a license. So she goes over to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and she gives her name to this woman behind the counter. And she said, and she looks at it, and Dana had never had a ticket in her life. Not one mark on her whole license. And this woman says, that's incredible, your record. And she said, I'm looking at it, though. In 3 months, you're supposed to come back to take your written driver's license again. Why don't you take both tests today? Dana said, tests? I didn't know I was supposed to take a test. And she's panicked. I don't know if they were teaching these people human relations, but this woman reached across the counter, patted her hand. Oh, Dana, with your driving record, I'm sure you can pass this test. And besides, if you don't, you can always come back. So I want to tell you, one of the interesting things, before I tell you what happened, is I recognized some of the people in this place, and they were people who used to beat citizens up. And now they're cheering them on. What do you think the difference is? Leadership, vision, values, and all. So Dana goes over and takes the test, brings it back to this woman. She falls one correct answer short of passing both tests. So officially she fails. This woman says, oh, Dana, you are so close to passing. She said, let me try something. I'm going to re-ask you one of the questions you got wrong on each of the tests to see if upon thinking about it, you can get it right. Now, isn't that amazing? But what's really amazing, there's only 2 answers to each question. She said, Dana, you chose B on this question. What do you think would be the right answer? Hey, you passed, And so I was telling this story one time, and at the break, a bureaucrat came up. And you can always spot the bureaucrats. They have really tight underwear on, and they walk a little bit like this, And this guy came, he says, why are you telling that story? That woman was breaking the law. Your secretary failed, And so I went back to see my new friend. And I told him the story. And he said, Ken, let me tell you one other thing. When push comes to shove around decision-making, I want my people to use their judgment before rules, regulations, or laws. He said, the judgment of my person was, your secretary had a perfect driving record. And she didn't feel that was fair to that kind of citizen for one missed thing to bring him back. He said, I guarantee if your secretary missed 3, 4, 5 questions, she wouldn't have given him the same. But in her judgment, that was the right thing to do. And he said, I would defend her decision with my job. Would you like to work for a guy like that? You see the whole concept? And when you get your people passionate, we did a study of this. What's the relationship between strategic leadership, operational leadership, employee passion, and customer loyalty and organizational success? You know where the biggest impact on organizational success comes from? Operational leadership. From turning the... Not that the strategic is important because you need it, but the point is your people and your customers, they don't know what your strategy is. They don't know what the initiatives are. They don't know what the values are. All they know is how they're treated. And if your people are treated by an organization that turns the pyramid upside down and drives leadership throughout the organization, empowers people, they get passionate about their work. They get excited about serving customers. And that's what the change in these people at the Department of Motor Vehicles was. It was just incredible to see. And when they do that, what do? They go out of their way to take care of customers. And what happens to customers? They get to be loyal. They can't believe it. And they start bragging on these people, which reinforces them again and makes them even more. And they create what we call raving fan customers. What's a raving fan customer? A customer that is so crazy about the way you treat them, they want to brag about you. They become part of your sales force and all. And that is so powerful, you know. It beats advertising every single time. Because if you create raving fan customers, they're out there and they're talking about you and they're bragging on you and all that kind of thing. And so my feeling is that if you're a bearer of hope and you're constantly saying to people, hey, together we can do this, you know. I mean, this is tough, but we'll make it. You know, let's not get down. We've pulled through other things together. We can do it and all. And you get them going and they get their shoulders back and, man, let's go get it and all that kind of thing. You really can be amazed at the kind of things you can do. And then that combined with treating them as your business partners, that they can bring their brains to work, that they really ought to be involved in decision making and share information with them so they know what's going on. And then you combine that with servant leadership that says, yes, the strategic leadership and direction and vision is really important, but where the real action is around operational leadership and implementation. And that's when we turn the pyramid upside down. That's where we do the thing. And just to end my talk, and then we'll have some questions, is that one of my big goals as I travel around the world is the reason we can't get more people to buy into servant leadership is that they're self-serving. And the reason they're self-serving, they think that who they are is a function of how much money they make, the recognition they get for their efforts, and the power and status they have in their position. Let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with making good money. There's nothing wrong with getting recognized for your ethics. There's nothing wrong with getting some power status. What's wrong is when you think that's who you are. Because what do? Your scorekeeping is there. How do we get these people already making millions of dollars that want more? I mean, that's so absurd. How much money do you need? How many houses do you need? And all that kind of thing. Why? It's their scorekeeping. Because their self-worth is attached to their performance plus the opinion of others. And they miss significance in life. And servant leaders understand significance. What's the opposite of making money? It's generosity. When we're talking about generosity, what are we talking about? We're talking about not only your generosity of your treasure, your money, but we're talking about your time, your talent, and I like to add a fourth, your touch, reaching out to people. What's the opposite of recognition? I think it's service. You know, how can I help? Is there anything I can do? And then what's the opposite of power and status? It's loving relationships. John Ortberg, who's a great pastor and friend, just came out with a wonderful book you ought to get called At the End of the Game, It All Goes Back in the Box. And it's a story about John and his grandmother when he was young. She was a vicious Monopoly player. Any of you ever play Monopoly? He said when she played Monopoly, she acted like she was the illegitimate child of an affair between Donald Trump and Martha Stewart, you know. And at the end of the game, she had everything and he had nothing. And she would get this great grin on her face and she'd say, John, someday you're going to learn how to play the game. One summer when John was 12 or 13, this kid moved next door who was an incredible Monopoly player. He practiced with his kid every day that summer because he knew his grandma was coming in September. And when Grandma came, he ran into the house, gave her a big hug and a kiss, and he said, Grandma, how about a Monopoly game? And her eyes lit up, and she said, let's go, John. But he was ready for her this time. And he came out of the chute, and he wiped his grandmother out. At the end, he had everything. She had nothing. He said it was the greatest day of his life. And his grandmother smiled and said, John, now you know how to play the game. Let me teach you a lesson about life. It all goes back in the box. He said, what? Everything you bought, everything you accumulate, all goes back in the box. And people don't get it. that you can push and shove in life for money. You can push and shove for recognition and power. Baby, when you die, it all goes back in the box. The only thing you get to save is your soul. And that's where you store who you loved and who loved you. I love the ending of Ghosts, which is getting a big play because Patrick Swayze just died recently. But remember that film? It's a story about a financial advisor who gets killed by a supposed friend. He gets to stay on Earth as a ghost to defend his girlfriend, Molly, played by Demi Moore. He gets to talk to her through this wonderful character that Whoopi Goldberg plays, kind of a clairvoyant type, by the name of Oda Mae. And at the end of the film, he's avenged his death. And the three of them are on the rooftop of Molly's apartment. And all of a sudden, this white light comes to get him. And Oda Mae says, "They're coming for you, Sam." And he turns to Oda Mae and he says, "Your mama would have been proud of you." And then he goes and stands in front of Molly. If you saw the movie, he never told Molly he loved her. Molly would say, "I love you, Sam." And what would Sam say? Ditto. And now with tears coming down his eyes, he says, "Molly, I love you. I've always loved you." And Molly's crying and she says, "Ditto." And then he goes to face the light. And he stops one last time and he turns to Molly. He says, "Molly, the incredible thing about this is you can take the love with you." And that's all you're going to take out of this world. Somebody asked my wife Margie recently, what is leadership all about? She said, leadership is love. It's not about love. It's loving your mission. It's loving your customers. It's loving your people. And get this, it's loving yourself enough to get out of the way so other people can be magnificent. And I think if we really do that, I don't care if it's hard times, we can make it together. So God bless.
Well, I think we can all now understand why Ken has sold 18 million books. We need a little bit more love in this world. You persuaded me of everything, Ken, except why there's not more love to go around. Why aren't more people inspired by the manager at the Registry of Motor Vehicles or Southwest Airlines? Why Southwest the exception? Why is it so extraordinary that your secretary was treated like a human being and encouraged to succeed?
Well, one of the things I've found is that the biggest addiction in the world is the human ego, which stands for edging God out and somehow thinking you're the center of the universe. And we edge God out in two ways. One is false pride, where we think more of ourselves than we should. We come from a more than philosophy, and we're pushing and shoving for credit. And the other is fear or self-doubt, when you think less of yourself. You're coming from a less than thing, and now what you're doing is you're protecting yourself. And the minute you come from a more than or a less than, you're always, judging, you're always separating, you're always distorting things. And we've started a, 12-step Egos Anonymous program because all of the great addictions are a result of fear and self-doubt, that they need something external to make me feel important. And a lot of people don't deal with the false pride and the stuff that we've seen in some of these leaders, I talked to people from the big car companies that said those leaders wouldn't even thought that they should maybe not fly a private plane to Washington to ask for billions of dollars. They just wouldn't even have thought about it. Now, why were they in trouble? And so I think that's the biggest thing. And what we need to do is to recognize that our ego does get to us. You'd love these meetings, we have people stand up behind
my name's Ira.
Yeah. And, first they can volunteer because, you can't force somebody to be in an AA meeting. And we say, if your ego's never gotten in your way, and either false pride where you felt badly because somebody forgot what you did, or you have self-doubt, you're afraid to give feedback because what will happen to you, you can leave. Nobody's left. And then we stand up and I see, "Hi, Ira." What would we say? "Hi, Ira." And then you have to say, "I'm an egomaniac," and share the last time his ego got in the way. And it's a really powerful thing, because that's the thing that just kills us, is we somehow put ourselves in the center of the universe. The anecdote for false pride is humility, and Jim Collins talked about in Good to Great. People with humility don't think less of themselves; they just think about themselves less. And the false pride, the anecdote for self-doubt and fear is unconditional love. How many of you have kids? How many of you love your kids? How many of you only love your kids if they're successful, if they are good athletes or good students, No, you love your kids unconditionally. What if you accepted that unconditional love for yourself? What if you realized God didn't make any junk and you could not perform well enough or be thought well enough to get any more love? You got all the love there are. You'd maybe look at the world a little differently rather than keeping score on your performance plus the opinion of others.
Who'd like to ask the next question, please? Or comment? Yep. Great. Yeah, I think we can probably hear you.
Southwest seems to get it again on their latest ad when they're talking about their bags.
Yeah.
And they're crying, my bags, they're gone. Again, sort of an attitude.
That's right. Yeah, it's just amazing. And you look at the companies that just kill the competition, they all get it. Like Chick-fil-A, every time you see anything in the fast food industry, they're number one. They got less than 2% turnover and 1,400 restaurant managers, from 1,400 restaurants. Their hourly, turnover is 75 to 100% less than anybody in the industry. First time I spoke to all the managers of Chick-fil-A, the president stood up and said to all these people, if you're going to err with our people, please err on the side of mercy. And I said, do you all realize the company you work for? The next time I spoke, I had to follow Michael W. Smith in the Chick-fil-A choir, And you look at that. You look at Synovus, chosen the number one company. Fortune finally said, stop applying for the best company to work for, because they created an all-star list completely based on servant leadership. It's just Ritz-Carlton, based on servant leadership. Horst Schulze, who started the whole thing. It just can name company after company that just kills the competition, and why people don't want to get it. And it's the human ego that keeps them from, and all those kinds of things.
Who's next, please? Stand up. Thank you.
Well, I wrote a book called The 1 Minute Apology. And so you might start off by saying, I couldn't sleep the other night, because I suddenly got this position. And I was just thinking about, what I could do differently that could make a difference. And I want to apologize for anybody that I might have, led in a different way. But this is where we're going. And people ask me, how do you turn a self-serving leader into a servant leader? There's only three ways I know. One is a near-death experience. That's very helpful. People almost die. They look at the world very differently. Second is a spiritual awakening, and I've seen that happen to people. And the third is a significant role model. And so you just look at, it's maybe getting up to that position. All of a sudden they get a chance to interact with some people. And start to look at best practices and start to realize maybe there's a better way to do this and all. But so often leaders don't want to act like they're vulnerable, like they maybe made mistakes in the past and all. I think that that's one of the ways to build your image and your people, because they all know that you're not perfect. And the quicker you admit it, the better. And I think that's, and yet you just don't get anybody who wants to do that, They all want to cover up. I wrote the 1 Minute Apology after the whole Clinton thing, with Monica Lewinsky. If he had just gotten up in front of the country and said, can you imagine what a jerk I am? here's the President of the United States carrying on in the Oval Office. I apologize. I just, hope that somehow you'll be able to forgive me. The whole country would have said, all right, Billy, stop it. And we would have gone on. We could have run the country rather than sitting around there trying to prove something, good apology is probably one of the best things you can learn.
Mr. Blanchard, your 3 routes to teaching how to be a servant leader suggests to me to be a little cankerous at this point. There's not very much of a role for business schools, for B schools. That's not a part of the curriculum, I don't think. So how do you see the role of business schools, management schools?
I tell you that I was including them, and I appreciate you bringing that up in the role model. I want to tell you, one of the biggest thrills I have, my title is I'm the Chief Spiritual Officer in our company. I leave a morning message for everybody in our company, and I do 3 things. First, I tell them who to pray for, because people tell me who's hurting and all that kind of thing. Then I praise people, and then I leave them. And one of the most powerful things, when all those Harvard MBAs signed that code of ethics, and I wanted to say, wow, now we're starting to cook, and I think that if business schools really started to teach servant leadership as the only way to lead, and it's not soft management, it's the only way to do it, and they don't have to go with the faith-based stuff, you can go with Greenleaf stuff or other people, I think we can really make a difference, and I'm really optimistic. We're involved in 2 master's degree programs, one at the University of San Diego, and it's a Master of Science in Executive Leadership, and then at Grand Canyon University we have an Executive MBA. And what we do is we intersperse the program with the basic business acronyms that you normally get in an MBA program. But we start off with self-leadership. The first thing is for people to look at themselves. What's my mission in life? What are my values? What's my leadership point of view and all? I think a lot of people have never taken a good look at themselves. Then we move to one-on-one leadership, which is now about building trust. And once you can lead another individual, then you can go to team leadership, and we move to that. And that's about building a community. None of us is as smart as all of us. And then we end with organizational leadership, which is, how do you run an organization, which is a bunch of departments and teams and all, with both results and people. And we intersperse that throughout the program. And it's a really powerful kind of thing. And I think a lot of people are saying we come away from this differently. And I think it's because, we're modeling different kinds of things. And I think that's what we need to look at our curriculum. I'm so pleased. A decade ago, you couldn't have found an ethics course probably in most business schools. And boy, they're there now, and they're really powerful. And I think we could really take a look. I think we've been spending too much time training business consultants and financial analysts, and I have nothing against those fields. But we need some leaders. Well, it's a real joy to be with you, and hope some of the thoughts I share might be helpful. Let me just end with one story. I became a big fan of the Special Olympics over the years, and one of my favorite stories, they even made an ad over it in Spokane, Washington, a number of years ago. In the 100-yard dash, they had 9 contestants in the male 100-yard dash, and they were all down the starting blocks with, like the regular Olympics, and the guy with a gun, bang, it goes off. And these 9 young people just race out of there as fast as they can, given their handicap or disability. And about a third of the way down the track, one of the kids tripped and fell. And he tried to get up, and he fell again. And he just lied on the track, and he just sobbed and cried loudly. 2 of his opponents heard him crying and stopped where they were and turned around and headed back towards him. The other 6 people raced for the gold. And these 2 young people helped this young guy up, and the 3 of them held hands and walked across the finish line together. And the crowd initially didn't know how to compute this. I mean, it was beyond their belief. And then when they finally got it, they stood up and they gave him a 10-minute standing ovation. And let me just say that you can make the world a better place. People say, do you want to make the world a better place? Yeah. What do you do when everybody laughs? You can make the world a better place by the moment-to-moment decisions you make as you interact with other human beings. You know, if somebody yells at you in the morning as you leave the house, you can either yell back or go back and give them a hug and tell them, hope your day is better. Somebody cuts you off, you can, give them the finger or send them a prayer. You got all kinds of choices on that, and the choice is always am I going to come from a servant heart or a self-serving heart? Are you here to serve or be served? And I think that's what I'd like.